All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. Podcast on the Sicha. Well, welcome back, Rabbi Moshe Gourarie, Rabbi Yisroel Wilhelm, and I'm your host today, Shmuli Nachlas. Today we are discussing Sicha in Likutei Sichos Chelek Chaf Aleph. The Sicha is the Sicha on Parshas Boy, the second Sichas Beis. And the topic we're going to be focused on today is the synergy of how to blend our emunah, our faith, the higher than us, the deeper perspective, where we sort of put our perceptions and understandings aside, versus living in this world and science and reality and the real world around us. But let's get started and hear a little bit about the Parsha and how does this all begin. Yisroel, set the table for us.
Yeah, thanks. So when I was teaching this to my students, I realized about 1 minute in that in order to really understand Kiddush HaChodesh and the laws of Rosh Chodesh, which is tomorrow, and this week's Parsha, and the first mitzvah in the Torah, I really have to, it's one of these fascinating mitzvahs where it has, and right away, as the Rebbe points out, has two parts to the mitzvah. So one of them is that there has to be a Beis Din court.
Yisroel, just give a second what Kiddush HaChodesh is.
Right. So it's sanctifying the new moon, which means the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. So these days, we just have a calendar that was set 1,700 years ago by Hillel.
If you don't have a Chabad calendar, call your local Chabad and make a donation.
Yeah. Exactly, and you know what Chodesh is, but the original mitzvah, the way it was set up to be, and it was that way for 1,700 years, was from when the first mitzvah the Jewish people were given in Mitzrayim, was that every month you had the expert rabbinical court, a Beis Din, who were very well versed in the most complex science of astronomy, and every Chabad boy knows, when you learn Rambam every year, when it comes to the laws of Kiddush HaChodesh, that it's extremely complex. Many of us just remember it when we're learning it and forget it a day later because it is that complex. It's not easy. You have to know math very well and astronomy very well, and certain concepts in science, and then. So they had to have the Beis Din had to know that. So they sort of knew based on that calculation when Rosh Chodesh would be. They didn't need anybody to help them. But the Torah wasn't happy with that, and it says that the Jewish people themselves have to sanctify it every month. So how would that process be? If you happen to be the lucky person who was walking down the block, and my students are fascinated, but like, hey, who's the lucky guy that gets to sanctify the month every year? So you were walking with your friend, you saw the new moon. You quickly went to Yerushalayim, if you were in the vicinity of Yerushalayim, and you went to the base of Mikdash, the temple, and afterwards, when the temple was destroyed, you went to wherever the Beis Din was, and you were quizzed like any witness in any case that would be, whether it was a murder case or a contract law. You were quizzed until they said, yeah, you guys are good witnesses, and with that, they sanctified the new month if they just found them to be true. So just
to add to that, right. Then the month is relevant to all the holidays, because all our holidays on our Jewish calendar are connected to that. So it's a very Correct. Important aspect. It's the first mitzvah of the Torah, but it's a very, very important aspect to everything Jewish, essentially.
Correct. And
in the time of Hanukkah, one of the mitzvahs that the Syrian Greeks prohibited was the mitzvah of following the calendar, because it is so fundamental to so many aspects within the Jewish faith.
And as we'll see, it's so fundamental to the faith of an emunah of the Eden. So it's fascinating, and obviously there's a lot to talk about Rosh Chodesh and this concept. But as it comes to this Sicha, the beginning, the Rebbe really lays a very strong foundation that the witnesses are regular witnesses. They're key witnesses, and if that's the case, the question is, why do we need a calculation? Why bother with knowing the astronomy? You two guys saw the moon last night, so they know it's Rosh Chodesh. That's obviously I'm saying the obvious. Every single month, the moon disappears, and then there's a new moon that shows up, right? Beginning of the month. That's how the Jewish calendar is based. So they saw it. So if they saw it and they had that, and they were proven to be good witnesses, then that should be enough. And yet it's not enough. We need to also have the calculation. And why both? And that's really
in other words, just to explain the question, there are many aspects in the Jewish religion where witnesses are necessary, and two witnesses come and they say what they saw, and Bezdin hears out their testimony, and if they're deemed to be true, then that is the entirety of that halacha, of that event. The witnesses saw it, that makes it happen. And for some reason here, we're asking, in addition to everything that the witnesses contribute, we also need the knowledge of the Bezdin. And the question is, what's different or unique about this mitzvah?
Right. And so the Rebbe goes into a fascinating place where he says, why is this the first mitzvah? Like from all mitzvahs, should this be the first mitzvah? I mean, obviously the first mitzvah should have been, believing in God, which is the first of the Seres HaDibros, the 10 Commandments. But why should it be the first mitzvah should be Kiddush HaChodesh? And specifically, the answer is because the first mitzvah is teaching us the purpose of Torah and mitzvahs, why we were given Torah and mitzvahs. It's not just because we believe in Hashem and we do whatever Hashem wants, but the purpose is a transformational process to make the world and to bring something novel into the world, and obviously novel into our experience as being Yidden. So, and that's where the Rebbe that's where I'm going to let you go, to start talking about this. The Rebbe says at the end that we need, in the first mitzvah, we need to have these two opposites. We need to have a part of Torah mitzvahs is about using your logic and using your mind, and a part of it is because it's the first mitzvah. That's the point. It's setting the stage for all mitzvahs. Is using your mind and the science is to the extreme more than any other mitzvah. And on the other hand, this witnesses, which represents faith, and this where I'll pass it on to you, Shmuli.
I mean, I just
want to add, Shmuli, before you jump in, before we discuss what the mission statement is, I remember it sort of in the beginning of the project Likutei Sichos, and many discussions we were having about, as we were being in a certain sense introduced to the Rebbe's Likutei Sichos, that Rabbi Manis Friedman once said that he was having a shir with teaching Sichos to people that did not have prior background in knowledge of Torah in general, and specifically in Likutei Sichos. And after a while, one of them, they were discussing what's so unique about Likutei Sichos. One of them, who was not in his life necessarily a full-fledged Torah-observant Jew, but he said every time the Rebbe encounters a mitzvah, that mitzvah becomes the entire Torah. When you learn Likutei Sichos, every single a mitzvah, you may have never even heard of the mitzvah before, but today that mitzvah becomes the entire Torah, which is a fascinating take. And it's exactly what happens over here, that Kiddush HaChodesh becomes the mission statement of Torah mitzvahs. And even before we discuss what that is, I just want to focus for a minute on the word HaChodesh, and the fact that in the beginning, before the Rebbe explains the concept of Dira B'Tachtonim, the Rebbe says the idea of making a chiddush, which means to bring something new, something novel to the table. And I know we're going to talk about Dira B'Tachtonim a little bit, but just the idea that what we could learn about not being satisfied with the status quo. The mission statement of Torah is we always have to be trying to find a chiddush, something new, something different than yesterday, that whatever we're doing, as we grow, it always has to be something new, that to never just look at the status quo and say, I'm doing what I have to do, but where could I innovate? Where could I be different? Where could I be better? And now I pass the floor to you.
Just on that, on the Dira B'Tachtonim part, and it's
talk about Dira B'Tachtonim. If you talk about it, introduce it.
Yeah, just for a moment, you're talking about knowledge and where the general. I mean, there's the general idea that the more you learn and the more you know, really should lead us to knowing how much we don't know. It's really, it leads us to less, even though we're attaining more. And I think that really dovetails into what we're talking about here, because let's just talk about the science and the math of this whole thing for a second, and just sort of understand it. It's very classical to feel, and every rabbi's got these questions all the time in your Stump the Rabbi sessions and so on, is, the science versus Torah, the age of the world and the dinosaurs and the carbon dating and on and on and on. And those are discussions of their own. Great, ask your local rabbi and have fun with that. But what's interesting is that occasionally when you find something that's discovered, written about in a journal, which validates something that we know for thousands of years, you find that there's a certain sense of almost like vindication or victory, or whatever you want to call it, for the observer, the listener. For example, I remember hearing once, it was actually on the radio, 680 News, once I was driving in the morning, and I remember they were talking about some journal report that came out about the advantages of going to sleep on your left side and waking up on your right side, or there was some study that was done. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is, the Rambam talks about this. This is something we know for ages and ages. Now, when we do this, this idea of the way we go to sleep and the way we're meant to wake up, why do we do that? The Rambam tells us that's what we're supposed to do. Obviously, the Rambam's saying it from a health perspective, but I'm just trying to bring out the fact that in general, Jewish tradition, we're always trained to look at our observance and the way we do a mitzvah. The ultimate way is without seichel, without understanding, without knowledge, because even the things that we do that have good reason, like not to steal and not to murder and so on and so forth, our way is because Hashem told us to do that. That's really the Jewish way. That's the mission statement. But here, we're really spending a lot of time on emphasizing the fact that there's tremendous amount of math and science in the constellations, in reading the moon, understanding it, knowing it, and being able to put together a calendar. And that has to be done. It's not enough to just accept that it's a certain way religiously through faith. So that's the first, I think, premise here, is acknowledging that we're dealing with a mitzvah which is so steeped, like Yisroel said before, that even the regular people you study, even if you study all the laws of it, which half of them it's hard to comprehend as it is, you need to be a real brain to get it. And even if you do, like, could you even hold on to all that information? It's very, very complex.
It happens to be that one of the hardest sichas we've learned in Project of the Sichas was on Kiddush HaChodesh, is about the sicha, where you see, first of all, the Rebbe's genius, greatness in simply in science and in Torah, to be able to put that sicha together, asking very famous questions. So yeah, there is no other mitzvah like Kiddush HaChodesh, which represents, that I know of, right? Which is just easy. Like I know my students were fascinated just how scientific it is and how logical it is, and that strengthens a question, which I'm going to ask the Moshe even more, right? About why, if we just know it all, if you like you said, it's in a journal. I make sense. It makes sense. Judaism makes sense to me. I'm in a space where it's good. I don't need emunah. Why is it so important over here? Let's start with that. Okay, we're going to go in the other direction in a moment, Shmuli. Right? But why is it so important to always to have the witnesses? Why is it so important to have the Eidim, which Moshe explained why the Eidim represent something that's faith-based?
So I'm going to introduce what I'm going to say with a Sicha that we had in the past in Project Likud Sichas about the Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. Yafutzu ma'nesecha chutza, which is what the Baal Shem Tov said to Moshe, what Mashiach said to the Baal Shem Tov, when your well springs will be disseminated into the outside world. And the Rebbe brings various different forms of that. One of them is the fusion of Nigla and Chassidus. It's not two separate things. It's part of the same Torah and how they complement one another. And here in the Sicha, we see that where the question comes from the Nigla world, why would we need, according to Halacha, both the knowledge of the Bezdin as well as the testimony of the witnesses? But the answer only comes from the perspective of Chassidus. And here Chassidus is complementing the Nigla, but what's happening here is that Nigla is usually seen as the more logical approach to Torah. And Chassidus is more emunah based, is more, even though obviously there's parts of Chassidus that are meant to be understood logically, but a lot of it is based on a Kabbalah's oil, on an acceptance, on a sense of bittul. And it's exactly what happens here in the Sicha, that in order to experience Yiddishkeit properly, you have to create a fusion of these two opposites. And just to respond to your question, the idea of Eidim is where Torah gives the strength, the power to Eidim to effectuate an event, where this event is not complete unless the Eidim see it. Even though we don't understand exactly what happened, once the Eidim see it and inform Bezdin that it's happened, the Torah decides now it's an event. Whereas the knowledge of the Bezdin is based not so much on acceptance, but it's based on logic.
It almost sounds like the philosophy, the classic philosophical question. If a philosopher or if somebody, if a tree fell in the forest and no one was there to hear it, did it make a sound? So the Eidim, Eidim means the witnesses. If there was no perception, it's almost like a debate of perception and reality. What ratifies reality? Is it the perception? And without that, there is no reality. And that is true in many areas of halacha, like marriage and other areas, that without that observation, there is no reality. But here it's weird because we've already ratified it. We don't need the witnesses in this case, because it's justified as a reality through the Torah, through the fact that the Bezdin has done their due diligence. They know the facts on the ground. So that we're back at the question here: why do we need the extra element of witnesses if you know? And before I turn it over, I just want to add one element to that question, because there's really a deeper question here. Let's stop and think about this question for a second. When you know something, or you feel logic is on your side, you're comfortable, you're happy, you've got it. So what's wrong? Leave me alone. Well, what do I need anything else for? That's really the question. What do you leave me alone? Whatever it may be. My business is running well. I don't need God. Whatever it is that politics, Israel issues, the hostage deal, what's right. You got it. You figured it all out. You understand. I understand. So the conversation should be over at that point. You should go to sleep comfortably. There's no reason to be rattled. There's no reason to be anything, and so on and so forth. So what's happening here?
Perfect segue, because you asked the question so well that the answer is so much more rich. And that is that you're 100% right. If your goal was to live a good life, even a Torah-based life, and to do everything, to get everything done, you're right. But the ultimate goal of creation, which is the chiddush, the novelty that the Sicha talks about, is to be able to reach beyond yourself, to reach the divine, and to draw the divine into your life and into this world. That's not enough to checklist that I've done everything I'm supposed to do. I did my tefillin, I raised my kids, I gave them a good life. But to actually transform yourself and to transform this world, to reach to something that is beyond you, namely the divine, and to bring that into every aspect of your life, that even your logic and even your feelings and things that make perfect sense to you should also become elevated, more refined, different, because it's infused with something that you can't actually define, but is in truth the ultimate reality, a bigger reality than the reality you thought it was. And that's exactly the discussion we're having, to reach outside of ourselves.
Before we continue, I just want to mention, because in the Sicha it mentions this, that to bring atzmos, which is the essence of God down here, in other words, to get to that higher place, the way to facilitate that, in the words of the Sicha, is bittul hayesh, which means that so long as I am me and I have that logic definition, I have that definition and interpretation of what I am and who I am and so on, and I can't go beyond that definition, that's a place of ego, essentially. It's a place of self. And if I want to make room for something greater, I need to go away from the yesh, the self, and move towards nothing, to be able to get away from that logic, to get away from not that it's wrong, but I want to achieve more beyond the checklist. My checklist is perfect. It's amazing. But we're talking now, we've channeled the conversation to say, okay, what's next? How do we go further? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yisroel?
No, I mean, look, next week is Yud Shvat, 75 years since the Rebbe took over the leadership of Chabad. And I think everybody for the last 75 years, a bestseller is write a book about Chabad, try to figure out why they're successful, right? And what's happening over here. And really, the Rebbe's ability from the first Maimer, Basi Lagani, to bring these two seemingly opposite ideas together. Because, there's, like Moshe said, there's Jews who do everything right, but they're not ready to lose themselves in Hashem. That, they'll do whatever's told from them. It can make sense to them. It's Yiddishkeit is fits. But to go create a chiddush, to create something novel, to change the world, to change even myself beyond what I'm able to, they put an end to that. And then you have the ability you can lose yourself in God too. I live a life of emunah. And so I'm scared of the world. I'm scared of the yesh. I'm scared of the reality of what is out there. But to fuse those two worlds together and say that they both exist at exactly the same time, which is your favorite topic, Moshe, how two opposites in the Sichas always exist together, I think is beautiful. There's a story reminding me. I once heard a story from someone. He said the Rebbe Gutnick in Australia went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe sort of asked him what's going on in the world in the Torah world. The other, that was sort of So he said there's two general things that people talk question the Rebbe. One is why the Rebbe took one medrash of this idea of that the purpose of creation is dir b'tachtonim, is to create a home in this lowly place. And that's it. From the first Maimer Basi Ligani, it was set in stone, and and this Sicha is so beautiful, right? And then another thing, so just how did this become the whole thing? Another question is that when you start these great mitzvah campaigns, you do it on your own. The Rebbe does it on his own. He doesn't ask any advice from any other world leaders. Like maybe you should ask before. And the Rebbe smiled and said, those two things answer each other. If you don't understand dir b'tachtonim, you can never understand my mitzvah. In other words, if you don't understand, this concept of putting these two opposites, atzmos, right? In the Sicha, it says at the highest level of God, with literally tachtonim, with the dirt in your mind, in your life, and that's exactly where the dir belongs. So it's like Hashem belongs, then you can never appreciate the concept of sending a 15-year-old Hasidic boy from Crown Heights to Midtown Manhattan and putting on tefillin and trusting that he'll be good at it, right? It's like you're mixing. Either live in Crown Heights or live in Manhattan. Why the two? Right? Why bringing the two together, right? So this is exactly this. But I'm hearing you talk. I don't know. It just reminded me of this. There's two ideas of being able to somehow. I have students who are like, tell me all the time. Judaism is like archaic. It's like old. It's like you're told what to do. Like it's not about using your mind, and they get like, wow, like you can actually have a discussion, like a logical discussion. That's what, and then right. It's hard for them to see the two worlds together. I'll pass it on to you, Shmuli. L'chaim over here, l'chaim. On of Yud Shvat.
I think that often we look at.
Get myself some more.
I think it's earlier in the morning in Boulder, Colorado than it is on the East Coast, by the way.
A little bit tea over here. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think that we struggle often with this balance. Let's just talk about it personally for a minute instead of about our students or our people or whatever, and people we know and so on. Let's just talk about ourselves for a minute. It's the balance of seder, of strategy, of business, of logic, of right and wrong, of dollars and cents, of checks and balances, of accounting, in our lives, especially all of us being shluchim. So all that within the framework of non-for-profit and working in shluchus and doing what we're supposed to do, and that orderly seder, what we're supposed to be doing. And then the flip side of that is Amunah. What are you talking about? What checks and balances? What are you talking about? I don't want to. What story? All this is nonsense. Everything is the Eibishter and so yeah, it's true. Yeah, and which one? The other one's not. So we grow up with this. It's an inner struggle. If any of my friends ever saw me doing too much accounting and too much checks and balances and this and that, what you lost your way? Are you nuts? On the other hand, if you have none of that, then who are you? How do you it's all Amunah. So I think that there's a message here for us, and there's a message in general. I think that my takeaway here from the Sicha is that they're both true, and like you were saying, that paradox is real. The coexistence, and this is just such a powerful, beautiful Chabad lifestyle. It's the paradox of Chabad, the paradox of Torah, the paradox of the way the Rebbe teaches Torah. Essentially, is that these two opposites coexist, and they're both real at the same time. The truth of your logic and the truth of Olam Haza, the truth of this world, is Hashem's reality. Yeah, that's true. And the calculations are real calculations. And then the flip side of that is, don't get too carried away. Everything's Hashem. Everything's Amunah. And I'll just bring it back to everybody's life, because people are always asking, how do I make a plan? How do I move forward? What's the right way to go? And the answer is both. You can't have one without the other. You can't say, I'm going to make a plan to fix my family issues. I'm going to make a plan to solve my marriage. I'm going to make a checklist to get married. I'm going to make a checklist to, all these things. You could do that too. You should have a reasonable, a fair, logical conversation with a good friend, with a rabbi, with whatever the right circumstances should be, with a lawyer, with an accountant, with whatever your circumstances represents, and that is the right thing to do. But it doesn't end there. It also has to be complemented. The healthy balance is with a healthy dose of faith and Amunah. And when you have those two together, then that's the recipe that we're learning about in today's Sicha.
Just for the benefit of the listeners who didn't learn the Sicha, just to encapsulate in very short everything that we just discussed, at least how the Rebbe answers the question. The question was why we need both the knowledge of the Bezdin as well as the testimony of the witnesses. And the Rebbe introduces the fact that this mitzvah is hachodesh, is the idea of bringing a novelty, something new to the world, and that newness is to make a dira, to make a dwelling place for Hashem in this world, to transform the physical, that it becomes a receptacle for the highest level of the divine, which is the greatest chiddush, because to be able to turn something materialistic or something physical into spirituality, or to bring down the highest level of the divine into this world is the greatest chiddush. It doesn't fit into any form of the logic of this world. Additionally, the way we do that is by incorporating both the best of our own tools, which the Sicha calls Tam Vadas, using our logic and our emotions, as well as going beyond ourselves, which the Sicha refers to either as Amunah, as faith, or Re'iyah, Re'iyah means to see something, which is when you see something, no logic can refute it. So seeing is really transcends logic. And going back to the mitzvah, what the witnesses do is they bring in the seeing, which is the transcending of logic, and what the Bezdin is doing is they're using their logic, the mathematical computations. And in order to be able to do this chiddush, this bring this newness to the world, you need to have both. You need to have the best of the tools that Hashem gave us, as well as the transcending our tools and the dependency on Hashem. And just to give my concluding remark here, to sort of complement everything that we just said, we were saying until this point, that everything that we do, it's not enough. We have to also reach beyond ourselves. And to say that in the other direction, the ultimate realization of Hashem's reality in this world is when we use all of our koiches. Instead of saying, oh, Hashem will do it for me. No, I can do this. That's what Hashem wants of us, that we should recognize and at the same time realize that we can do more than we think we can. That's the ultimate realization of the divine, that we, the physical human beings that Hashem created, could reach beyond ourselves. And just to follow what Yisroel said before about Yud Shvat, when the Rebbe took upon himself the mantle of leadership, and he told us that the mission of this generation is lahoidit es hashchina lamata ba'aretz, to bring the Shechina down into this world, and he's speaking to each and every one of us. The Rebbe was emulating this chiddush that Hashem made and saying to every single one of us that despite the fact that you think you're limited, and despite the fact that you think you can only go this far, you, the seventh generation, the final generation of Galus, you have the ability to do this. You can bring the Shechina into this world, and together we're going to do this, and we're going to bring the Gula.
Yisroel?
Beautiful. That is, I just to continue what you're saying, really, you said it all. It's very empowering when the Sicha says the idea that for Hashem to create the world, Hashem could do anything. It's not a big deal. For Hashem could create it. What is God? But the fact that we, as limited human beings, can do something even greater reminds me of the Sicha that, the Sicha about why Hashem made it, that you have to work so hard, right? So he says that the classic answer is because through hard work, that's when you feel good, you accomplish. And the Rebbe says, so Hashem could have created it differently. Hashem could have made it that, you can enjoy life without others. The same creator created this nature, created that nature. And ultimately the answer is the greatest gift in life is we could be like Hashem. We could be God-like. We could be creators. That's the greatest gift. Hashem wants us to work hard because that's what you create. And to me, this is what the Sicha says, is Hashem creating the world was nothing. That Hashem gives us a mission statement through Torah and mitzvahs that we can create chiddush, that we can, exactly the way you said it, Moshe, so beautifully, that we can create something novel within the powers that we were given, the talents that we were given, and the strength that we were given, and the realities that we live to create a novelty for Hashem. And that is a very empowering message. It's a very uplifting message that of the strength that we each have. So thank you for pointing that out,
L'chaim. Just to wrap it up, I guess I'll just leave my last comment. If anybody's asking how, sounds great, but how do you do it? So the answer actually is very, very simple. And that is, and I'm just speaking from I'm sharing my personal thing. We're Yud Shvat, starting a new year cycle of learning the Rebbe Sichos after 5 years. I will say to you, the honest to goodness truth is that if you learn the Rebbe Sichos, you will, number one, be loaded up with a tremendous amount of successful logic in life, in Torah, in Chassidus, in Nigla, in Gemara, in Kabbalah, in everything. So you just figure out how to be a successful person. Like you just could wake up in the morning and be successful. And then the next question is, where does the Emunah come from? And the answer is the same place. So if you learn the Rebbe Sichos, and it just works for me, you get it all. You have a successful way of life, and you have an immense amount of Emunah just being poured right into you just by learning the Rebbe Sichos. So we'll wrap it up with that for today.
Let's just remind the people that are watching that this coming week, Parshas B'Shalach begins a brand new cycle, the 6th year of Project Likutei Sichos, and it's a brand new set of Svardim. We're going into Chaf Hei through Chaf Tes, volumes 25 through 29.
Join us.
Starting with B'Shalach of Chelek Chavav. And it's a great chance. If you've been doing this before and sort of slacked, it's a great time to get back onto the wagon. And if you've never done it before, it's a great time. We have a website, projectlikutesichos.org, and an app, Project Likutei Sichos, on Apple and on Android, that has incredible shiurim and incredible resources. And this is a perfect opportune time to get onto this bandwagon. So, as I said the other night, with all the humility that I could muster, I encourage you, get onto the bandwagon.
Thank you.
Thank you.